Beautiful people out there in global land. Good morning, good afternoon, happy Thursday. Welcome,
everybody. Global land? I love that.
Global land. I think that should be a whole place. Just global land, you know.
Awesome.
Of course, it does exclude those unknown beings out in the universe. So we don't want to do that. We want to invite them in. That would be important all the time.
Would it then be universal land, I guess?
Universal land.
And I thought that existed in Orlando, Florida, but that's another universal land. All right, okay. Welcome, everybody, to Chaps, Many Cultures, the place where too much culture is not a thing. No, what is the tagline? I keep forgetting.
Too much culture is never enough.
That's what it is, see? I should have this memorized by now.
Absolutely.
Oh well.
And of course, culture, we talk a lot about culture, a lot about countries, a lot about, we learnt this week, it's not always about culture. It's about many people belong to different cultures and come from different cultures. And I want to set today's guest up because this is very special. We are very honored to welcome a guest today. And I want a little bit of background because the reason I'm so interested in this, I know everybody is, but I did have the great honor of spending a lot of time with the National Kidney Foundation here in the state of Illinois, and working in the area, working in Chicago here predominantly, and doing a lot of work in different communities. And one of the communities we did was, of course, with the African American community. And what I learned, which I kind of already knew, but I learned a lot, I really learned, they taught me a lot, is about some of the specific health challenges that exist, all right, in different communities, whether it be Asian communities, African American communities. And of course, that's not just the physiological side of it. There's also the delivery and the structural side of it in the treatment of it. So without further ado, and may I say that I, again, very excited to welcome our wonderful guest, the great Carmen White Janak. And people, just before she starts to speak, I don't know who's, I just remember there was a famous line that somebody said, y'all about to go to church.
Can I get a witness?
Hallelujah. Hallelujah.
Welcome, Carmen. This is awesome.
Christian, the fact that you knew to say, can I get a witness? Listen, you just made my heart happy. It just made my heart so happy.
I've lived in the Bible Belt long enough to know a few of the prompts.
Because you're in Atlanta?
I am, and before that, I lived in the Tennessee Valley for. I don't want to tell the people how long I lived. I lived in the Tennessee Valley for quite a bit. All right.
Yeah. So well, then you already know. But yeah, I'm so excited to be here with you guys today and to talk about something that's very near and dear to my heart and all the reasons that it is. So Janet Turner, amen. I love it. Yeah, and so I'm so excited that Brett, that you even asked me and invited me to be on today. It's such a pleasure.
Well, we do a lot. There's another saying too that when you travel, you actually they're saying been there, bought the T-shirt. Mm-hmm. Well, and maybe we can't travel. You can still buy T-shirts. So.
Yes, you can. Yes, I love it.
It's my favorite color too. I'm a green dude, so
looks good on you, mate. Looks good on you.
Great, I love it. And so so you see here, this is Black Mental Lives Matter, and Carmen is a wonderful advocate and out there doing work and advocacy for this. And I'm just going to let Carmen. We should just let you explain it. I don't know why I'm even trying, but
well, it's okay. You know what? I started. I will say this. From the moment as a 10-year-old little Black girl in South Texas, I grew up in San Antonio, Texas, when we weren't moving around as a family. With the military, and as a 10-year-old girl, because my father passed away, he transitioned at the very young age of 37 years old. And as a 10-year-old girl, and my brother was 14, my mother was trying to figure out how to help her children. How do we do that And of course, as you all have already intimated, I grew up in the church. I grew up in the Black church and grew up very specifically in my great grandfather's church. And my mother was and is a woman of faith. And so, of course, you do all the praying, you do all the things, but her children were still crying themselves to sleep every night, months after the initial trauma of having to bury their father unexpectedly. And so my mother was like, I've got to find some answers for my children. And so that's how I got introduced. This is 1975. So let me just tell you that in 1975, there were no African-American or Black therapists in San Antonio, Texas.
What?
Zero.
Isn't San Antonio quite a Black city?
It's mostly Mexican American, Hispanic, Latino. But there is a large we represent, so to speak. However, but this is 1975. So I'll give you a small statistic, and then you'll understand. Right now, we're in 2020. Black people, African Americans, only represent 2% in the APA, the Association of the American Psychological Association, 2% in 2020.
And so, the percentage all over in the population is what, 12, 13%?
Yes. So you think about 2% African American or Black persons represented, therapists and so forth, representing the APA, and then you have 14% or so of African Americans across this country. There's not enough people who look like us to support us, right? So there I was, me and my brother, and so I still say today, that is single-handedly the best gift my mother ever gave me, was the gift of therapy. Oh, wow. Hands down, the best gift she ever gave me, because it allowed me to see myself and understand things that no one around me really understood. How do you process through this thing called grief? And we're all collectively grieving in this country right now. Oh yeah. On a multiplicity of areas, right? And there's so many layers of grief. Whether you have had to bury family members, as I have, who succumbed to COVID or cancer, but in the midst of COVID-19, in the midst of the pandemic, just 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago yesterday, I was in San Antonio burying my first cousin, who I grew up with, that's more like a sister. And it hit us so hard, and we're still inside of it. I was just talking with one of my cousins last night as she's processing, because she spent 7 months caring for our cousin.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that, Carmen.
Yeah, it was tough. It's really tough because we were very close knit. We were the crew that were at our grandparents' house every Saturday. Every Saturday. We played together. We fought. If you wanted to fight one of us, you had to fight all of us, and you didn't want that in your life. You did not want that in your life. And so, so we're all grappling around what is happening in our world. And for some people, it has triggered a temporary mental challenge. And what I mean by that, temporary in terms of depression, anxiety. I have found myself dealing with anxiety in a way that I have not before in my life. And I really did not know. I knew what it was when it happened. I knew what it was. And so I was like, oh, I got to up my game of not only self-care, but adding support to what I do. And so, Dr. Eileen Edgington, she set me up for the rest of my life. As a 10-year-old little Black girl who didn't know how to deal with the grief and the anger and feeling abandoned by her hero.
Right.
Like, how does that happen? Like, and it was an existential crisis, right? I didn't know to call it that then, and no one else it was an existential crisis because I'm trying to figure out, wait a minute, you guys told me that God loved me. Couldn't. You could not. And remove, because that was my understanding at the time, and remove my hero out of my life. How could you even like me?
Right. So that kind of rattled your faith a little bit.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And but that's where my understanding of mental health began with Dr. 𝙈𝙬𝙣 𝘾𝙝𝙀. And I decided as a 10-year-old little girl that if she could do this for me, I want to do that for other people for the rest of my life.
So here's a question that I have, and this may be a stupid white boy question, because A, I'm white, and B, I didn't grow up in the United States. But C, if I may, I think I've had my fair share of deeper interaction with the African American community. And it's my impression, this is very anecdotal, this is just my experience, and I want you to tell me if I'm off. My experience is that especially males, African American males, do not have the tools or never got permission to deal with some of their non-supportive emotions. So that there is an unspoken truth of if I'm hurting mentally, if my mental health is affected, it's nothing that I carry out into the public realm. Maybe I have a best friend that I can relate this to, but this is not something that I carry on my sleeve because that has never been endorsed. That's not a behavior that's been endorsed to talk about it. So I know mental health.
Though, Christian, it's not just males; it's across the board.
Yes, and granted, my interaction with the African American community is probably more with men than with women. Okay. So
sure.
But is it true though? Is my suspicion correct that in the African American community, it's even more a taboo, or it's even more a no topic to talk about mental health or mental illness than it would be in the majority population of white America?
Absolutely, it's absolutely true. I mean, my narrative goes on like this. When my when people at our church found out, one of my mother's best friend's husband knew that we were going to start seeing a therapist, he stopped my mother in front of the altar at the church and basically wanted to chide her, and did, around like, you don't have enough faith, you're not praying enough. And she said, hold up. You don't, and I was standing right there. She said, you don't get to say that to me, because number one, your wife is next to you every night. Number two, you're not at home with my children when they're crying themselves to sleep every single night. It has been months. It has not stopped. They do it every single night. When you're not there, when after I try to console my inconsolable children, that then I walk down the hallway to my bedroom and cry myself to sleep. So you don't get to judge, basically what she was saying. You don't get to judge what I'm doing with my kids because you have no idea what this is. You have no idea. You've never even had this. This is my lived experience.
Well, what denomination was that?
That was it was Baptist. My grandfather was a Baptist preacher. Came out of a Pentecostal line. One of the largest Pentecostal churches, the Church of God in Christ, which, you know, if you've watched the news during COVID, was hit very, very hard with COVID-19. In fact, one of the very first people that I knew that transitioned from COVID-19, the complications of coronavirus, was one of my best friend's father, who was a Church of God in Christ bishop. And he, along with several other leaders within Detroit, they were hit very hard. So many people, because they were all at the same place.
Right. Would it be safe to say, and again, I'm creating sweeping generalizations for the sake of simplicity and for the sake of being corrected by you. So I'm bringing up a picture here, and you tell me if this is right or wrong. Would it be safe to say that many Black churches have developed a sense of strong cohesion and a protective bubble around their community as a result of the slavery experience. So this is the safe place where we belong. And if you dare to venture out of that safe circle, like going to therapy, then you're betraying your own people. Would that be a safe assessment?
That is great.
Sorry, just before you answer that, so
Sure.
that's the thing that I learnt working with the Kidney Foundation, because it happened with physiological ailments as well. Is that the struggle was getting the community to engage with something that we were doing for free. There were screenings about, to screen kidneys, and it was a challenge for especially the African American people in the foundation that constantly had to report back to the leadership that was asking, why don't the people come to these things? Well, this is free, we're providing, why don't they come? And so that was, to Christian's point,
yeah,
that was how it was explained, is that we kind of we were kind of just dropping in, and it wasn't coming from inside the community. So I just wanted to add that, if that was the same thing as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a lack of trust. And I think one of the things that I know that, and I want to say this in the most loving way that I can, that well-meaning white people really believe that if you offer something for free to communities of color, that they should just flock to that thing. Yeah. And that here's what's true. We don't know you.
Yeah.
We don't know you. And we have very good reason
not to trust you.
Right.
Yes.
I mean, hello, we have very good reason to be suspicious, not only about slavery, but also just think about the Tuskegee experiment,
right.
All of those things like that, that have occurred inside of our community because we trusted someone who did not look like us from the majority community. Right. So to answer your questions, yes, the whole thing around trust. And let me just say this to be very, very clear. Even as a Black woman, if I am not living inside of a particular community, I have to gain trust too, because I don't live in that community, right? And I don't get a pass just because I look like folks. No, I have to be trusted too. And so that whole taboo, in that, like right now, the NBA and the WNBA are inside of these bubbles and wobbles, right now, to play ball. And that's what the Black community built, because we had to. If it was about safety. And so even inside of slavery, the church was where all information was disseminated. If you know the history of the civil rights, all information was disseminated through the church. If the Kidney Foundation, you really wanted to be successful, then you should have went to the churches first, got a buy-in from the pastors, and then start. So yes, that's a part of why it is still, and it's also what we don't understand is the stigma and the taboo, which is why having these conversations, and I'm finding it even in my own family, my cousins are now so incredibly supportive. Why? Because they're beginning to understand something they didn't understand before. Yeah, so it's normalizing, like we're doing today. We're normalizing this conversation around mental health, so people don't have to fear it as much and fear like I don't know what they're gonna do. I don't know what they're gonna say. So for me to be able to say, hey, this is how this goes, and make a differentiation between, psychiatry and psychology and behavior and meds, and if you need to do meds or whatever. But it's really important that we understand that those are some of the factors. And environment, there's a great movie out right now. If you know Ron Artest, he now has changed his name to Meta World Peace, but he played on the Lakers, one of their championship teams. And one of the first things that he said when he won was, I want to thank my psychiatrist. And I remember when that happened and people laughed at him. They said all kinds of things. And he said, no, I never would have made it this far without her. In fact, he flew her in.
Oh, wow.
The last night of the game so that he could have focus and concentrate, because the game was on the championship was on the line. And so there's different people, celebrities, etc., who are normalizing this conversation, but we've got to get it. We've got to get it where the big mamas and the big daddies and all of them understand it as well too, because across generationally, we've done things like we're going to care again inside of this community bubble. We're going to care for our own. And I mean, I had a cousin who had mental illness and it was diagnosed. I mean, he had it for decades. And we were told as little kids, he was back in a back room. And here's what's mind blowing. Most Black folks can tell you that they had an uncle or an auntie or a cousin in this same predicament. They were in a back room in the house and you were told as a kid, don't go back there. Leave them alone. And that's how they were handled. There was maybe only one person, maybe the mother, who could handle that person. And that was the role during the day. You didn't go back there. You just didn't do it. But that was how it was handled. And it was decades before he was diagnosed as bipolar.
Oh, wow.
Decades.
So is it because African American communities didn't have access to mental health help, or is it because they thought of it as not an issue, they were not aware of the issue, or was it because they didn't trust majority non-Black psychiatrists or therapists, or is it a mixture of it all?
It's all of it. It's all of it, because no one, if you already have all these layers of things that you have to overcome on a daily basis, you're not trying to add another one, especially one that in the community gets you ostracized and gets you almost excommunicated. You become on the fringes of the community, of the beloved community, because now you have placed this other thing, and this other thing says we don't even use kind words. We'll say, oh, she's crazy. Oh, y'all didn't know that he was crazy? Yeah, he's crazy. Y'all need to leave him alone. And so no one wants that particular labeling, because you already have so many already that you deal with on a continuous basis. And so we're not going to add one that you're going to be looked down upon, because it's different if you say, I have cancer.
Yeah, that's a physical ailment that you can always put that in a certain corner.
Or I have diabetes. You can't say I have a mental illness and it's under control. You can't even say people stop listening to you as soon as you say I have a mental illness, a mental disorder. You don't even get to say, but the medication controls it. This is how I keep it in check. I'm in therapy. I go to group every week. You don't get to say those things, because that means something at a very base level something is wrong with you, and I don't know how to deal with you. I don't know how to handle that.
So, what would you say if I said mental illness maybe even more prevalent in the African American community because of the 400 years of disadvantage that they have been in this country, that they've always been dealt a bad deck of cards, and that there's this perception of a constant uphill battle? Did you think that contributes to to mental not well-being, especially in the Black community, or would that be too simple to make that connection?
No, I think it goes hand in hand, because a lot of it, and this has been proven scientifically, that a lot of the physical ailments, disease, physical challenges. The root of that is in a some type of mental challenge that has not been diagnosed. And so it's going, and it's, you know, it's the soma, right? The body and the mind and the psyche, they work in concert with one another. And so many people don't realize that. And so we deal with the things that are happening with the body, but not the things that are happening in the mind. And sometimes it's a chemical imbalance in the brain, but we don't know that because we won't go to we won't go to seek help, because that's another thing, is like, and then if we do, we're not going to tell someone that I actually went to I went to go see a therapist today. Yeah. I had to find I work with someone saying, does Carmen work with just the Black community?
Yeah, there's a question from our audience. So do you work with Blacks only, or?
Oh, no, absolutely not. No, my emphasis is on the Black community, because Black healing in this country is, in my opinion, is a public health crisis. And so, and I mean that across the board, from physical, we've seen it inside of this pandemic, that the Black and brown people have been hit in disproportionate ways as opposed to white folks. Right now, I've been doing some research around women, and Black and Latino women have a greater, are experiencing greater in greater proportions around their mental health, not being at optimal mental health right now than their counterparts, white women. We're right now, I think, African-American women, Black women are like something in the high 40s, Latino women we're almost neck and neck, and then white women may be like in the high 30s. And so there's a disproportionate amount, whether it is mental health, also physical health, but yeah, mental health with communities of color are disproportionately higher than white communities. For example, young men ages 10 to 14 commit or have more attempts at suicide. I think it's the rate is something like 240% for African-American young Black boys 10 to 14, as opposed to 120% with young white boys, same thing. I live in the state of Oklahoma. We're number 8. And I'm sorry, number 10 in the country for death by suicide. It is the number 2 leading cause of death in the state of Oklahoma is death by suicide. Check out these numbers from ages 10 to 34.
These are traumas. I mean, this just adds to trauma, doesn't it? So the trauma's out already. You're losing these great people. We're losing these human beings. And then the effect that loss has then perpetuates more trauma.
Yeah, because then you deal with shame. Families then deal with shame because we don't want to say how someone died.
So how would you respond to Antimo's
amazing
comment here, you know? Right?
Antimo says, amazing how the discomfort of not knowing how to deal with or stepping into unpredictable behaviors or responses can shut down compassion, love, and the courage that goes with both of these sentiments. So
yeah, and that's part and parcel of what's occurring right now inside of the community. That I was just talking with someone yesterday who needs to use social media for work, but the onslaught of the negativity that also comes with social media is a threat to their mental health. And so how I explained the example that I gave to her of how to do it is like double dutch, the jump rope game, double dutch. And when you're playing double dutch, you've got to figure out, you're leaning in, you're standing on the side, leaning in, trying to figure out when to get in, when's the right time to get in. So I told her, I said, listen, you've got to get in and get out, get in and get out, get the information that you need and get out, because that continuous buffeting by social media, by watching, I can tell you as a Black woman, I did not watch the full unfolding of George Floyd's assassination. I could not. It was enough for me personally to see the knee on the neck. That's all I needed to see. And I have learned that if I want to sustain my mental health, I cannot watch things like that. I can talk about it. I cannot watch things like that, because for us, then it's hard to shut it down and shut it off. Because as a mother, then I go to, that could be my child.
Right.
And just a week ago today, it could have been my child with an accident that happened in the city of Tulsa. And if you know the history of Tulsa, we're rounding the 100th anniversary of the massacre, the race massacre here in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And, you know, we ran into that good old boy system right here, right down the road from our building where our son was in an accident. And what we experienced, I was like, wow. And it's 2020, and it's like we can't make this stuff up. And what occurred, had my son been the person in the wrong and had done the exact same thing that this man was doing to him, calling him names, and actually in front of me, calling him names, antagonizing him, walking behind him after my son has asked him very kindly, sir, please stop, man, please stop talking to me. And he is walking behind him, just talking at him. And if my son had done the same thing, I know the very least I would have rounded the corner with my son sitting on the side of the sidewalk in handcuffs at the least. Or I could have rounded the corner with caution tape with my son's body out in the street. And that's real. So I've had to deal with that mentally. And that's the number one reason why I don't watch those murders like that. I don't.
And I think, and this is something that the majority population in this country isn't always fully aware of. And I say this in the most non-judgmental, non-accusatory tone of voice that I can come up with here, because I am part of the majority, even though I'm an immigrant. So I'm not a native to the United States. But if people don't know that, they look at me and they perceive me as part of the majority population. And I've had the privilege and the pleasure to, as I said earlier, to have had and to continue to have deeper interactions with my Black friends. And I will not forget this. And I've said this on video before, and I think it fits in here. I have one of our closer friends. He's a Black male in his 30s. He's very athletic, and he's a very assertive young man. Grew up in let's say non-privileged circumstances in South Georgia, and he's made it out. He's successful in his own right. And I remember he was at our house with his girlfriend. We're having dinner. We're having a conversation. Families coming together, sharing a meal, sharing a drink, and talking about everything about life. And it got late. It was like, I don't know, 11-ish, getting close to midnight. And I said, hey, are you sure you want to drive home? You can crash here, because we all had a couple of glasses, and it may not be, no, I'm taking an Uber. And all of a sudden he had this memory come over him of driving while Black at night. And it caught me completely off guard. I was like, what's going on? I said, oh, you have no idea. And then he went down a deep mental rabbit hole. He was sobbing in tears at my dinner table. I mean, it took a turn. The conversation took a turn, and I just sat there, first of all, completely helpless, not knowing how to deal with this. And then when my empathy finally kicked in, I realized what was going on. And he's in his early 30s, and he told me that he can't even remember how many times he had been pulled over for no other reason than driving while black, and being accosted by police, and being arrested once for the suspicion of having illegal substances, or being, I don't know, driving under influence. I don't know what the suspicion was. He was just there for a couple of hours, but the experience seems to be the same over and over again. And I, who have lived in this country for 17 years, I've never had that experience. And I talked to many of my white friends, and they say, well, if I have a run-in with the police, it usually goes something civil path like this and that. But that the black story, the black experience, is not known to most of the majority population. And if you're watching this, and if you're white and you're getting in your feelings because I'm saying this, then my plea to you is, listen to these stories. Why would people make that stuff up? This is real, and this contributes, this builds, accumulates to that mental pain. I can only imagine what that must be like.
I went live. I videoed the entire thing when the police did arrive. And here's something that my son did, and he was so wise, and I was so incredibly proud of him, because he would not call the police until he had someone else there with him.
Right.
There was someone there. There was another young man that stopped because he saw everything. But my son said, the guy was saying, man, you should call the police. He said, absolutely not. I'm black. You're black. He's white. The police come here. He said, absolutely not. Absolutely not. Not until I can feel protected, and not until I can feel safe. And that is real. And so I did 2 videos last Thursday, and one of them, it was after everything was over, so to speak. The initial thing was over. And I want to say this, especially to non-melanated folks. I want to say this to you, is that I want you to understand, and I want you to hear this. Just because Black people, African Americans, leave an incident with their life, do not ever believe that nothing has happened to them. Mm-hmm. Something did happen. Mm-hmm. My son had to think in nanoseconds about what he was going to do. Typically, would you call the police when you had an accident? Absolutely, not when you're Black. Mm. Typically, would you approach the other driver and ask for insurance and stuff? Yes, not when you're Black. Mm. Because I witnessed this man change his tone, his expressions, his body language when the police showed up, and when my husband, who is white, showed up, and the police officer then went back and told him that my husband was an attorney. Complete about face when he talked to us again. Before he was belligerent, before he was demeaning, before he was dismissive of us as humans. Mm-hmm. And we know not to agitate that personality. Why? Because when the police show up, they will go to the side of the person that doesn't look like us. And in fact, when the policeman showed up, it wasn't just one police officer. Then there was the second police car. Then there was the third, and then a fourth showed up. And you want to know why? Because when I called, I said this. I said, I am the mother of an African-American man. And we do not feel safe with the person who's here. Now, we've seen it happen in the reverse when someone white says, I don't feel safe because, so literally.
You mean the Central Park Karen, you mean?
Yeah, there's so many Karens. Mm-hmm. So many Karens. But yeah, so that's what occurred. And so now, there's an African-American male, got to get there.
Mm-hmm.
And how they had conversation with us about 2 to 3 minutes. They had about 25 minutes total with this guy. And it's just, and I want people to really understand that, you know, I was, and my son was, we were grateful that he left there with his life. But did he leave there with his dignity?
I recommend this to people because it hit me hard. Because I live in Atlanta and I know where the movie was shot. A movie came out, I think it was last year, maybe the year before, based on a novel. It's called The Hate You Give. If you haven't watched that, folks, watch that movie and especially pay attention to the first 10-15 minutes of that movie. Because the house where they shot it is really 2 blocks from my house, and actually now I told you where I live. I shouldn't have done that. And it shows what I think is called in African American families, it's the talk. And which I asked many white folk around here. I said, "Do you know what the talk is?" And they said, "Oh, you mean the show on TV?" I said, "No, the talk that African American families have with their kids." And they give me that blank stare. They say, "I don't know what you're talking about." So if you don't know what the talk is, go watch that movie. In the first couple of minutes, you'll see what the talk is, that most African-American families have that conversation with their kids on how to interact with law enforcement in this country. And the fact that they feel a need to have that talk tells you what's wrong and will explain a lot of the mental imbalance that you may find in parts of our country.
Mm-hmm.
Carmen, I wish we would have more time today.
I know.
We should be talking about this all day because this is a topic that is not only, I don't think it's entertaining at all. I think it's a relevant topic, and I think it's something that needs to be addressed more often. We want you, as you're watching this live or the replay, check out the URL that you're seeing on your screen. This is where you find Carmen. And if you're wondering how come her last name is Janak or Janak, or however you want to pronounce it, she gave you a clue earlier. I think it's your married name. The white guy that you married to brought that name into your will, right?
He did. I'm not an original Janak. I'm an original white. I will tell you the reason why I want you to go to the website is because I'm in the midst of this campaign. Brett has on the shirt today. And
let us see the shirt. Brett, let us see the shirt again.
Brett, Black Mental Health Matters. And I have shirts, tanks, and mugs for purchase. And it's a purchase with a purpose. And that is to give 100% of the net sales goes to mental health organizations who are already doing the work to further programs, to introduce new programs in communities that look like me, who need it the most, and to other communities, especially in Oklahoma in the rural areas. So I would love it for you to go, those of you who are in the audience today, to go by and check that out, make a purchase, and know that you're making a difference in the life of someone who really needs it the most and who needs mental health support.
Amen to that. Mic drop, Carmen. All right. Thank you for being on. Thank you for watching.
Thank you guys for having me.
Many cultures. Take care.
Thank you so much, Carmen. It's been wonderful. See you again soon. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Bye-bye.